Have you ever wondered if the stones themselves could whisper secrets of a lost world? If the very air in the high Andes still carried echoes of ancient conversations, strange facts, or perhaps even unresolved mysteries from a time long before our own? It's a curious thought, isn't it? To imagine the lives lived and empires built in places now only ruins, silent sentinels of forgotten power. We're about to journey back to one such empire, a civilization that, despite its incredible might and sophistication, vanished with a speed that still baffles historians and archaeologists alike, leaving behind a legacy carved in mountains and myths. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The story we're about to dive into, the tale of the Inca Empire, begins not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet murmur of creation myths and the slow, deliberate rise of a people from humble beginnings, eventually stretching their dominion over a vast and challenging landscape. And so, our narrative unfolds with the initial flicker of light in the Andean darkness, painting the mythical origins of the Inca Empire, tracing its beginnings from the legendary Manco Cápac and the foundational myths of Cusco, a city that would become the very heart of their world. Imagine a time long, long ago when the world was perhaps a bit less organized, and people looked to the heavens and the earth for explanations of their existence, dreaming up powerful figures to explain the inexplicable. One of the most enduring of these tales, a story passed down through generations like a cherished family heirloom, speaks of four brothers and four sisters emerging from the cave of Pachacuti, a place imbued with sacred power, their destiny intertwined with the dawn of a new era. Among these siblings, Manco Cápac stood out, chosen by the sun god Inti himself, or so the legends say, to lead his people, the ayllu, on a sacred quest to find a fertile land where they could settle and establish their civilization. A task that seems utterly monumental when you consider the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Andes. He carried a golden staff, a symbol of his divine mandate, and was instructed that where the staff sank easily into the earth, that was the promised land, a place where their future city would flourish, bathed in the benevolent gaze of Inti. This golden staff, a surprisingly practical divining rod if you think about it, led them through valleys and over mountains, until finally, in a bowl-shaped valley nestled high in the Andes, the staff effortlessly disappeared into the rich soil, a clear sign from the gods that their arduous journey was at an end. This valley, which they named Cusco, meaning navel of the world in Quechua, was to be their home, the sacred center from which their empire would expand and radiate its influence. Manco Cápac, a figure who straddles the line between myth and early history, is credited with founding the city, teaching his people how to farm, build, and organize themselves, essentially laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most remarkable empires in pre-Columbian America. Now, whether Manco Cápac was a real person or a composite figure representing a series of early leaders, a question that still sparks lively debates among those who pore over ancient texts and archaeological digs, his story served as a powerful legitimizing myth for the Inca rulers who followed, cementing their divine right to rule, which is a pretty neat trick if you can pull it off. They believed they were direct descendants of Inti, the sun god, and therefore Their authority was absolute, unquestionable, and divinely ordained, which, let's be honest, makes for a very tidy power structure. This belief in divine lineage wasn't just a fancy title. It permeated every aspect of Inca society, from their elaborate religious ceremonies to their strict social hierarchy, influencing everything from whom you married to what job you did. The early myths also speak of Mama Oklo, Manco Cápac's sister and consort, who taught the women weaving and other domestic arts, ensuring the survival and prosperity of the fledgling community. Because let's face it, an empire can't run on divine mandate alone. Someone has to make the clothes and cook the food. These foundational stories, while perhaps not strictly historical in the modern sense, provided a cohesive narrative for the Inca people, instilling a shared identity, purpose, and a deep connection to their sacred land and the celestial powers that guided them. They were, in essence, the very first history lessons, whispered around crackling fires, reinforcing a collective memory of their origins and their special place in the world. And so the small settlement in the Cusco Valley began to take root, nurtured by these myths, fueled by the ingenuity of its people, and guided by leaders who, whether mythical or real, laid the first stones of an empire destined for greatness. This initial period was less about grand conquests and more about survival, about learning to thrive in the high-altitude environment, developing agricultural techniques, and slowly, surely, building a sense of community that would serve as the bedrock for future expansion. It was a time of small victories, hard-won lessons, and the quiet, determined spirit of a people finding their footing in a vast and beautiful yet challenging world. As the mists of myth slowly dissipated, the focus shifted from divine origins to the gritty reality of building a civilization. And this section delves into the early development of Cusco, concentrating on the initial expansion and consolidation of power among the nascent Inca rulers, a period often overshadowed by the later imperial grandeur, but absolutely crucial for laying the foundations. Think of it as the awkward teenage years of a future superpower. A lot of growing pains, a fair bit of trial and error, but ultimately a necessary stage for what was to come. The initial settlement, as we briefly touched upon, wasn't immediately a sprawling metropolis. It was a cluster of humble dwellings, perhaps more village than city, populated by the descendants of Manco Cápac and the various groups they managed to integrate, sometimes peacefully, sometimes less so. The early Inca rulers, or Sapa Incas, who followed Manco Cápac, were less emperors of a vast dominion and more powerful tribal chiefs, akin to local warlords, constantly navigating complex alliances and rivalries with neighboring ethnic groups in the Cusco Valley. This was a challenging time, full of skirmishes over fertile land and access to water, where survival often depended on a shrewd tactical mind and the ability to rally your people. Each Sapa Inca during this formative period, whose names like Sinchiroca, Yupanqui, and Manco Cápac might sound like a secret handshake to us, played a vital role in gradually expanding the influence of Cusco, not through sweeping conquests, but through a more gradual process of consolidation. They were like careful gardeners, patiently tending to their patch, making sure the roots were strong before the plant could truly blossom. One of the key strategies employed by these early rulers was the strategic intermarriage with the daughters of neighboring chiefs, a surprisingly effective form of ancient diplomacy that created intricate webs of familial ties, reducing the likelihood of conflict and fostering a degree of loyalty, or at least mutual self-interest. It was the ancient world's version of a corporate merger, but with more elaborate ceremonies and probably fewer PowerPoint presentations. This wasn't always a smooth process, of course. Sometimes these alliances crumbled, leading to renewed hostilities, proving that even in the Andes, family drama could be a real headache. They also focused on agricultural improvements, expanding the terraced fields, and perfecting irrigation systems to feed a growing population, because a well-fed populace is generally a happier, more compliant populace, and frankly, a strong military needs strong stomachs. The architectural endeavors during this time were modest compared to the colossal stone structures that would later define the empire, but they were no less significant. They began to construct more permanent dwellings, develop basic urban planning within Cusco, and build small administrative centers, slowly transforming the valley from a collection of scattered settlements into a more cohesive, organized entity. This wasn't about building wonders for the ages just yet. It was about creating functional spaces for a society that was steadily growing in complexity. We can imagine the early mornings in Cusco, the smell of wood smoke, the sounds of hammers on stone, and the murmur of a community slowly, deliberately shaping its destiny. A significant development during this early phase was the gradual adoption and refinement of Quechua as the lingua franca, the common language, across the expanding territory. While various local dialects persisted, the promotion of Quechua by the Inca leadership helped to knit together diverse communities, facilitating communication and administration, and fostering a sense of shared identity, which is pretty important when you're trying to build something bigger than just your own backyard. Historians still argue whether the dominance of Quechua was a natural organic process or a deliberate policy imposed by the rising Inca elite. But its spread was undeniably a crucial element in their eventual success. It's hard enough to conquer people, but imagine trying to rule them if you can't even tell them what you want. As Cusco grew, so too did its military capabilities. The early Inca army was not the professional, highly organized force of later imperial times, but rather a militia drawn from the various aylus, or kin groups, armed with basic weapons like slings, clubs, and spears. Yet they were fiercely loyal to their Sapa Inca and possessed an intimate knowledge of the mountainous terrain, making them formidable defenders of their homeland. These early military engagements, often localized conflicts, served as a crucial training ground, honing their tactics and instilling a sense of martial prowess that would prove invaluable in the coming centuries. It was during this period that the Inca developed their unique blend of aggressive expansion and strategic integration, recognizing that sometimes a negotiated peace, buttressed by a show of strength, was more effective than endless warfare. This balance between the iron fist and the velvet glove would become a hallmark of their imperial strategy. By the time the 9th Sapa Inca, Pachacuti, appeared on the scene, Cusco had transformed from a humble village into a formidable regional power, a well-established city with a burgeoning population and an increasingly sophisticated administrative structure. The early rulers had painstakingly laid the groundwork, cultivating alliances, improving agriculture, and developing their military, creating a stable core from which future expansion could spring. They were, in essence, setting the stage, preparing the players, and polishing the props for the grand drama of empire that was about to unfold. Their efforts, though often overlooked, were the quiet, essential steps that paved the way for the monumental achievements of their successors. With the groundwork meticulously laid by his predecessors, the stage was now perfectly set for a figure who would not merely expand the Inca realm, but utterly transform it. And this section chronicles the meteoric rise of Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, detailing his transformative leadership and the pivotal moment he reshaped the Inca state from a regional power into a sprawling, formidable empire. Imagine a flickering flame suddenly erupting into a roaring bonfire. That, in essence, was the impact of Pachacuti. Born Qhapaq Yupanqui, he was not originally destined for the throne, being a younger son of Viracocha Inca, which, in the royal family pecking order, often meant a life of supporting roles rather than leading the whole show. Yet fate, as it often does, had a dramatic plot twist in store for him, one that involved a truly terrifying threat to the very existence of Cusco. The traditional narrative, rich with the kind of heroic drama that would make a Hollywood scriptwriter weep with joy, tells us that during a desperate invasion by the formidable Chanca people, a rival group from the west, his father and elder brother fled Cusco, believing the city was lost. This, to put it mildly, was not a great look for the ruling family, but Qhapaq Yupanqui, refusing to abandon his home and his people, rallied the remaining defenders, inspiring them with a courage that bordered on the legendary. He is said to have seen a vision, a divine prophecy from Inti, the sun god, promising victory if he fought on. And this vision, whether real or a brilliant piece of wartime propaganda, galvanized the beleaguered Incas. He led the defense with a ferocity and tactical brilliance previously unseen, pushing back the Chanca forces against overwhelming odds. A battle that secured not just Cusco's survival, but also his own place in history. It was during this crucible of conflict that Qhapaq Yupanqui earned his new name, Pachacuti, which translates rather dramatically to Earthshaker, or he who overturns the world, a moniker he would certainly live up to. This victory was the pivotal moment, the true genesis of the Inca Empire as we know it, instantly elevating Pachacuti from an overlooked prince to a revered savior, endowed with divine favor and military genius. It's like being the underdog in a sports movie who not only wins the championship, but then invents a new sport entirely. After securing Cusco, Pachacuti didn't just bask in the glory. He immediately set about a radical restructuring of the city and the fledgling Inca state. He literally rebuilt Cusco, transforming it from a collection of modest structures into a magnificent capital, designed to reflect the grandeur of a rising empire. He initiated ambitious public works projects, including the construction of the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, which became the spiritual heart of the empire, gleaming with gold and radiating power, a testament to Inti's blessing and the Incas' newfound might. This rebuilding wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a powerful statement of intent, a physical manifestation of the new imperial order he envisioned. Pachacuti also reformed the political and administrative structures, centralizing power and establishing a more efficient bureaucracy, essential for governing a rapidly expanding territory. He created the Tawantinsuyu, meaning the four quarters, dividing the empire into distinct administrative regions, each governed by a loyal appointee. effectively creating a hierarchical system that extended from Cusco outwards. This organizational genius allowed for remarkable control and resource management across vast distances, a feat that would be impressive even with modern technology, let alone just quipus and messengers. He was, in essence, the ultimate project manager, overseeing a complete rebrand and expansion of the entire Inca operation. His military campaigns were systematic and strategic, driven by a clear vision of empire. Unlike earlier rulers who engaged in smaller-scale conflicts, Pachacuti embarked on a series of rapid and decisive conquests, extending Inca dominion far beyond the Cusco Valley. He utilized a blend of military might and shrewd diplomacy, often offering defeated groups the opportunity to integrate peacefully into the empire, retaining some of their customs and leaders, provided they accepted Inca rule and paid tribute. This carrot-and-stick approach was incredibly effective, minimizing prolonged resistance and maximizing resource acquisition. He wasn't just about conquering land. He was about integrating people and resources into a coherent, productive whole, making the conquered feel, at least in part, that they were becoming part of something grander. Under Pachacuti's leadership, the Inca developed their sophisticated road system, expanded their agricultural terracing, and perfected their communication networks, all vital components for maintaining control and prosperity across their growing domain. He also initiated the formalization of the Mita labor system, where communities contributed labor for public works projects, ensuring a constant supply of manpower for his ambitious building and expansion plans. Historians still argue whether the Mita system was a benevolent communal endeavor or a highly organized form of state exploitation, but its effectiveness in mobilizing massive resources is undeniable. By the end of his remarkable reign, Pachacuti had transformed the small kingdom of Cusco into the vast and complex Inca Empire, stretching across much of the Andes, a testament to his vision, his military prowess, and his unparalleled ability to shake up the world. The transformation of the Inca realm under Pachacuti from a regional power to a burgeoning empire was cemented by a defining conflict, and this section describes the critical confrontation with the Chanca, a formidable rival, detailing how this pivotal moment solidified Inca dominance and propelled their irreversible expansion. If you thought the Chanca were just a footnote in the story, think again. They were the terrifying monster under the bed, the existential threat that forced the Incas to either sink or swim. And boy, did they swim. Before Pachacuti's rise, the Chanca Confederacy, located to the west of Cusco, was a powerful and aggressive entity, a force to be reckoned with, known for their martial prowess and their rather unsettling habit of collecting the bones of their defeated enemies. They were, in essence, the school bullies of the Andes, and they had their sights firmly set on Cusco. Their relentless expansion had brought them dangerously close to the Inca heartland, and by the early 15th century, the stage was set for an inevitable clash. The Chanca, confident in their strength and their fearsome reputation, launched a full-scale invasion of the Cusco Valley, aiming to crush the burgeoning Inca state once and for all. This wasn't just a border skirmish. It was an all-out assault, an attempt to wipe the Inca off the map. Accounts describe the Chanca army as vast and terrifying, adorned with war paint and carrying their distinctive axes, advancing with a menacing chant that echoed through the valleys, surely striking fear into the hearts of many. At this critical juncture, as we mentioned, the reigning Qhapaq Inca, Viracocha, and his designated heir, Urco, made the truly baffling, if perhaps understandable, decision to abandon Cusco, believing the city indefensible against such a powerful foe. Imagine the panic, the desperation, as the leaders packed their bags and made a swift exit, leaving their people to face the music. It was a moment of profound crisis, a true test of the Inca spirit. But from this despair emerged Pachacuti Yupanqui, the young prince who would soon become Pachacuti. He famously refused to flee, standing firm amidst the terror and confusion, a beacon of defiance in a sea of despair. He rallied the remaining defenders of Cusco, the old men, the women, the children, anyone who could hold a weapon, and inspired them with a speech that surely would have been plastered on motivational posters if they had them back then. He spoke of their ancestors, their divine lineage, and the sacredness of Cusco, igniting a spark of hope and fierce determination in their hearts. This was not just a military stand, it was a spiritual battle, a fight for their very identity. The desperate defense of Cusco began, a chaotic, bloody affair where every stone and every alleyway became a battlefield. The Chanca, initially confident in their overwhelming numbers, were met with an unexpected ferocity. The tide of battle began to turn due to several factors. Firstly, there was Pachacuti's inspiring leadership and tactical brilliance. He was not just a figurehead. He was actively involved in directing the defense, making crucial decisions on the fly, demonstrating a natural aptitude for warfare. Secondly, the sheer desperation of the Inca defenders, fighting for their homes and families, gave them an almost supernatural strength. And perhaps most famously, according to Inca legend, the very stones of Cusco rose up and joined the fight, transforming into warriors known as Pururacas, aiding the beleaguered Inca, which is either a fantastic piece of epic storytelling or a truly terrifying hallucination brought on by extreme stress. Either way, it makes for a great story. The Chanca, caught off guard by the unexpected resistance and the ferocity of the counterattack, eventually broke and fled, suffering a catastrophic defeat. This victory was an absolutely transformative event for the Inca. It validated Pachacuti's leadership, proving him to be not just a courageous warrior, but a divinely favored leader, establishing his legitimacy as the true Qhapaq Inca, even over his fleeing father. This was a clear sign from the gods, if ever there was one. The Chanca, once the dominant power, were utterly broken, their confederacy shattered, and many of their former territories became easy pickings for the newly invigorated Inca. The defeat of the Chanca removed the most significant immediate threat to Inca expansion and provided a massive boost in morale and resources. It demonstrated the effectiveness of Inca military organization and the profound loyalty Pachacuti could command. This pivotal victory marked the true beginning of the Inca imperial period. With their most dangerous rival vanquished, the path was clear for unprecedented expansion. The Chanca War was not just a battle won. It was the crucible that forged the Inca Empire, transforming a regional power into the formidable force that would soon dominate the Andes, a testament to the fact that sometimes the biggest threats create the greatest opportunities. With the Chanca threat decisively neutralized, the Inca Empire, now under the undisputed and visionary leadership of Pachacuti, embarked on an era of unprecedented growth. And this section outlines the systematic methods of Inca territorial expansion, including their blend of shrewd conquest, skillful diplomacy, and the remarkably effective incorporation of diverse cultures into their burgeoning dominion. Imagine a meticulously planned chess game, but on a continental scale, where every move was calculated, not just for immediate gain, but for long-term integration. The Inca weren't just conquering, they were absorbing. Their expansion wasn't a chaotic rush across the Andes. It was a highly organized process, often beginning with a diplomatic overture. Before sending in the troops, the Inca would dispatch envoys to neighboring polities, offering them the chance to peacefully join the burgeoning empire. This offer came with certain undeniable benefits: access to the vast Inca road network, inclusion in the sophisticated Inca economic system, protection from rival groups, and often a promise of continued local autonomy in exchange for allegiance and tribute. It was, in essence, an offer they often found very difficult to refuse, especially if they'd just witnessed the fate of the Chanca. However, if diplomacy failed and a group resisted the friendly invitation, the Inca military machine was ready to roll. Their army was a highly disciplined and well-supplied force, utilizing a hierarchy of commanders and a sophisticated logistical system that ensured troops were fed and equipped, even in the most remote areas. They employed a variety of effective tactics, including overwhelming numerical superiority, flanking maneuvers, and the psychological impact of their sheer scale and organization. Their weapons, while not iron or steel, were devastatingly effective in their hands. Slingshots that launched stones with incredible force, macanas, bladed clubs, and spears tipped with fire-hardened wood or bronze. Once a territory was conquered, the Inca immediately implemented a policy of integration, which was far more nuanced than simple subjugation. They understood that sheer force alone couldn't maintain an empire over such diverse peoples and vast distances. A key aspect of this was the Mitimai system, where loyal Inca populations or recently conquered groups were forcibly relocated to new areas. For instance, a group from a rebellious region might be moved to a firmly established Inca area, while loyal Inca subjects might be sent to a newly conquered territory to help integrate the local populace and instill Inca customs. This mixing and matching of populations helped to break down local resistance, spread Inca culture, and create a more homogeneous imperial identity. It was a bit like a giant empire-wide social experiment, though perhaps without the informed consent. Furthermore, the Inca paid careful attention to the conquered people's religious practices. While the worship of Inti, the sun god, and Viracocha, the creator god, was promoted, local deities were generally tolerated and even incorporated into the broader Inca pantheon. The idols and sacred objects of conquered peoples were often brought to Cusco, not necessarily to be destroyed, but to be held in the Coricancha, the temple of the sun, as a symbolic gesture of Inca supremacy, essentially saying, "Your gods are here with our gods, and our gods are clearly in charge." This clever move allowed for a degree of religious continuity, making the transition to Inca rule less jarring and reducing the potential for religiously motivated rebellions. The Inca also systematically introduced their administrative systems, including the use of quipus for record keeping and the implementation of the Maida labor tax, which required every able-bodied person to contribute a certain amount of labor to state projects, from building roads and temples to working in state-owned fields. This wasn't a monetary tax, but a labor contribution, which meant that conquered peoples were immediately put to work, often on projects that benefited the empire as a whole, thereby strengthening the very system they were now a part of. It was an ingenious way to extract resources and labor, while simultaneously integrating new subjects into the imperial economy. Historians still debate whether the Mita system, particularly its forced relocation aspects for the Mitamai, was ultimately beneficial or exploitative for the conquered populations. But its efficiency in consolidating power is undeniable. New territories were swiftly connected to the existing Qhapaq Ñan, the vast Inca road system, allowing for rapid communication, military deployment, and the efficient movement of goods and administrators. Garrisons were established in strategic locations, and loyal governors, often chosen from the Inca nobility or from trusted local leaders, were appointed to oversee the newly incorporated regions. The Inca even sent teachers to newly conquered areas to instruct the local elites in Quechua and Inca customs, ensuring that future generations would be fluent in the language and ways of the empire, a subtle but powerful form of cultural assimilation. By combining military might with sophisticated administrative techniques and a pragmatic approach to cultural integration, the Inca created an empire that for a time stretched over thousands of miles, a testament to their unparalleled ability to expand and consolidate power in the challenging Andean landscape. The prodigious growth of the Inca Empire, stretching across vast and varied terrains, demanded an equally sophisticated system to manage its complexity, and this section examines the intricate Inca administrative system, highlighting the ingenious use of quipu for record-keeping and governance, a silent language of knots that held the secrets of an entire civilization. Imagine trying to run a country the size of ancient Rome without writing, without coins, and without modern computers. Sounds impossible, right? Well, the Inca managed it, and their secret weapon was the quipu. At the heart of Inca administration was an elaborate bureaucracy, a vast network of officials responsible for everything from census taking and tribute collection to managing state-run agricultural projects and overseeing the Mita labor system. Unlike many other complex societies, the Inca Empire did not develop a system of phonetic writing. This isn't to say they were less advanced. Rather, they found an alternative, a unique and highly effective method for storing and communicating information, the quipu. These fascinating devices were not mere abacuses or simple mnemonic aids. They were complex arrangements of knotted strings, meticulously crafted and imbued with layers of meaning. A quipu typically consisted of a horizontal primary chord from which numerous pendant chords hung, often with subsidiary chords branching off, creating a kind of three-dimensional spreadsheet made of cotton or camelid fibers. The information was encoded in the type of knot used, the direction of the knot, the position of the knot on the cord, the color of the cord, and the way the cords were spun and plied. Each element held specific significance, allowing for the precise recording of numerical data, such as census figures, tribute quotas, agricultural yields, and astronomical observations. It was a tactile database, a silent symphony of strings. The mastery of quipu creation and interpretation was the domain of highly trained specialists known as quipu kamayoks, or knot keepers. These individuals held positions of immense importance within the Inca bureaucracy, serving as the living memory and statistical backbone of the empire. They were literate in a unique sense, able to read the knots and extract precise information, essentially acting as human data processors for the state. They were responsible for maintaining accurate records of everything from the number of llamas in a particular region to the precise amount of maize stored in a state warehouse. Imagine being a human Excel spreadsheet, but with the added pressure of remembering thousands of knot configurations. While the primary function of quipus was numerical, there is a lively and ongoing scholarly debate about whether some quipus might have also recorded non-numerical information, such as historical narratives, genealogies, or even laws. Could they have been a form of proto-writing, a way to tell stories without spoken words? Many researchers believe that certain types of quipus, often referred to as narrative quipus, encoded complex historical and mythological information, though deciphering these remains one of archaeology's greatest challenges, like trying to read a very old, very convoluted text without a Rosetta Stone. Historians still argue whether the Inca fully achieved a true form of narrative writing with quipus, or if their narrative function was more mnemonic. The administration of the empire relied heavily on the efficient flow of information encoded in these quipus. Messengers, known as chasquis, would run along the vast Inca road system, carrying quipus from one administrative center to another, ensuring that the Sapa Inca in Cusco had up-to-the-minute data on his sprawling dominion. A commander could dispatch a quipu detailing troop movements. A governor could send a quipu summarizing harvest yields. And the central administration could issue orders and directives, all communicated through these ingenious knotted cords. It was a testament to their organizational prowess that such a complex society could function without a conventional writing system. The quipu system facilitated the highly centralized control that characterized the Inca Empire. Every aspect of economic life, from the distribution of goods to the allocation of labor, was carefully managed and recorded. The state could precisely track its resources, ensuring that food surpluses were moved to areas of scarcity, that labor was efficiently deployed for public works, and that tribute was collected consistently. This detailed record-keeping allowed the Inca state to operate with remarkable efficiency, mobilizing vast quantities of resources and manpower for its ambitious projects and military campaigns. It was an ancient version of big data before anyone even knew what data was. The loss of most quipus after the Spanish conquest, either destroyed by the conquistadors who saw them as pagan idols or simply lost to time, represents an immeasurable loss of historical information. The handful that survive continue to fascinate scholars, offering tantalizing glimpses into the administrative genius of a truly unique civilization. The quipu stands as a powerful symbol of Inca ingenuity, a testament to their ability to innovate and adapt, creating a sophisticated system of governance and record-keeping that was perfectly suited to the demands of their vast and complex empire, a silent testament to a world now lost. The vast administrative machinery of the Inca Empire, as we've explored, relied on a highly efficient flow of information and resources, and this section further explores the critical role of the extensive Inca road network and its vital function in communication, military logistics, and the seamless economic integration across the immense stretch of their dominion. If the quipu was the empire's brain, then the roads were its nervous system, carrying impulses and lifeblood to every extremity. This wasn't just a few paved paths. We're talking about a marvel of ancient engineering, a network so extensive it rivaled, and in some aspects surpassed, the famous Roman roads, known as the Qhapaq Ñan, or Royal Road or Main Road in Quechua. This incredible system spanned over 40,000 kilometers. That's about 25,000 miles, roughly the circumference of the Earth, connecting the empire's farthest reaches from modern-day Ecuador and Colombia in the north to central Chile and Argentina in the south. It wasn't a single highway, but a complex web of two main north-south roads, one along the coast and another, more challenging, through the high Andes, connected by numerous transverse roads that crisscrossed mountains, deserts, and jungles. Imagine trying to build a perfectly usable road through the Himalayas with only stone tools and sheer willpower. That's essentially what the Inca accomplished. The engineering prowess required to construct the Qhapaq Ñan was simply astonishing. Inca engineers, without the use of wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or sophisticated surveying equipment, carved roads out of sheer rock faces, built suspension bridges over treacherous canyons, and constructed causeways across swamps. They utilized local materials, often laying down finely cut stone pavement in mountainous areas and compacted earth or sand in coastal regions. Where necessary, they built elaborate retaining walls to prevent erosion and drain swamps with ingenious canal systems. It was a masterclass in adapting to incredibly diverse and often hostile environments. And yes, they did all this without ever yelling. Are we there yet? The primary purpose of this massive infrastructure project was to facilitate rapid communication and control. The Shaskis, highly trained relay runners, were the empire's living postal service, carrying messages and quipus at incredible speeds. Stations, known as tambos, were strategically located every few kilometers along the road, serving as rest stops, supply depots, and relay points for the Shaski. A Chasqui would run his segment, hand off the message, or quipu, to the next runner, and the information would literally fly across the empire, allowing the Sapa Inca in Cusco to receive news from the furthest provinces within days, sometimes even hours, something that would take weeks for the Spanish on horseback. This level of rapid communication was vital for maintaining centralized authority over such a vast and geographically challenging domain. Beyond communication, the Qhapaq Ñan was indispensable for military logistics. When the Inca army needed to be deployed, these roads allowed for swift troop movements, ensuring that soldiers and supplies could reach trouble spots efficiently. Garrisons were often strategically positioned along the road network, acting as deterrents and quick response units. The ability to project power rapidly over long distances was a cornerstone of Inca military dominance and a key factor in their successful expansion and consolidation of conquered territories. It meant that even a seemingly distant rebellion could be quashed relatively quickly, which tends to discourage further uprisings. Economically, the road system was the circulatory system of the empire. It enabled the efficient distribution of goods, particularly the vast quantities of agricultural surplus produced in various regions. Foodstuffs like maize, potatoes, and quinoa could be moved from areas of plenty to areas of scarcity, preventing famine and ensuring the well-being of the populace. State-owned warehouses, also known as kolkas, were built along the roads, storing food, textiles, and other goods for distribution to the military, workers on state projects, and those in need. This centralized economic control, facilitated by the roads, was a hallmark of Inca societal organization. Historians still argue whether the primary benefit of the road system was military or economic, but its dual utility is undeniable. The roads also facilitated cultural exchange, albeit under Inca terms. They allowed for the movement of Mitime groups, the forced resettlement of populations that we discussed, and the spread of Quechua as the official language. While local trade continued, the vast majority of goods moving on the Qhapaq Ñan were under state control, a reflection of the highly centralized nature of the Inca economy. The very presence of such a sophisticated network, built and maintained through communal labor, served as a constant physical reminder of the empire's power, its reach, and its ability to mobilize vast resources. It was a concrete expression of the Inca state's presence in every corner of its domain, a truly impressive feat of engineering and organization that continued to function even after the arrival of the Spanish, a testament to its enduring quality. Beneath the grand infrastructure and the intricate administrative systems of the Inca Empire lay a deeply stratified yet remarkably cohesive societal framework, and this section details the intricate Inca social structure, focusing particularly on the foundational importance of the ayllu system and its pervasive role in community organization, labor allocation, and familial bonds. Imagine a pyramid, but one where every block, no matter how small, was intricately connected to and supported by those around it, all held together by invisible threads of kinship and obligation. That's the ayllu for you. At the apex of the Inca social pyramid was the Sapa Inca, the divine emperor, considered the direct descendant of Inti, the sun god. His authority was absolute, both political and religious, and he lived a life of unimaginable luxury and ritual, attended by an extensive retinue of servants and nobles. Below him was the royal family, the Panaka, composed of his wives, children, and descendants, forming a powerful elite that held significant influence. These were the true Incas by blood, the ruling class from whom all major appointments and decisions emanated. Next came the Inca nobility, a broader class comprising Incas by privilege, individuals, often from conquered elite families, who were granted Inca status for their loyalty or service, along with administrators, military commanders, and high-ranking priests. This class enjoyed significant privileges, including exemption from direct mitter labor, access to fine goods, and elaborate residences. They formed the administrative backbone of the empire, ensuring the Sapa Inca's decrees were carried out across the vast dominion. However, the vast majority of the Inca population, the commoners, belonged to an ayllu. This was the fundamental social and economic unit of Inca society, far more than just a family. It was a self-sustaining community, often encompassing several related families, bound together by common ancestry, shared land, and reciprocal obligations. Think of it as a supersized extended family that also functioned as a local government, a labor cooperative, and a social safety net, all rolled into one. Every individual, from birth to death, belonged to an ayllu, and their identity was inextricably linked to it. The ayllu held land collectively, with members receiving usufruct rights to cultivate specific plots for their own sustenance. Importantly, the ayllu was also responsible for contributing labor to state projects through the mita system. When the state needed workers for a road, a temple, or a mine, it called upon the aylus to provide a certain number of individuals for a specified period. This wasn't necessarily seen as oppressive. It was part of a reciprocal relationship where the state, in turn, provided resources, protection, and famine relief when needed. It was an ingenious system of collective responsibility and mutual aid. Historians still argue about the exact degree of individual autonomy within the ayllu system, but its collective nature is clear. Beyond agriculture and labor, the ayllu also played a crucial role in social organization and justice. Disputes within the community were often resolved by ayllu elders, and transgressions were addressed through established customary laws. The ayllu provided a strong social safety net. Members looked after one another, ensuring that the elderly, the sick, and the infirm were cared for, which meant that even without a formal welfare system, no one was left completely destitute. This deep sense of communal responsibility was a defining characteristic of Inca society. Below the commoners, at the bottom of the social hierarchy, were the Yanacona, individuals who had been removed from their ayllu and served as permanent retainers for the nobility or the state. They were not slaves in the traditional sense, as they could accumulate wealth and even rise in status, but their lives were directly tied to their patrons. There were also the Mitimai, as we discussed, groups forcibly relocated for strategic reasons, who, while still maintaining their ayllu structure, were often placed in a different social context, serving the imperial aims. The Inca social structure, while rigid and hierarchical, was remarkably stable for centuries due to this intricate web of reciprocal obligations known as aini, reciprocity, and minka, communal labor for the common good. Everyone had a place, everyone had a role, and everyone was expected to contribute. The Sapa Inca provided order and divine favor. The nobility administered, and the commoners, through their aylus, provided the labor and resources that sustained the entire magnificent enterprise. It was a system that, for all its complexities, worked, ensuring the smooth functioning of an empire, built on collective effort and a profound sense of community, a testament to their unique understanding of social cohesion, woven into the very fabric of Inca society, permeating every aspect of daily life and grand imperial endeavor, was a profound and complex spiritual worldview. And this section discusses the rich polytheistic Inca religion and cosmology, exploring key deities like Inti and Viracocha, and their central pervasive role in shaping everything from agriculture to imperial conquests. Imagine a world where every sunrise, every mountain peak, every drop of rain was imbued with divine significance, and your very existence was a dance with powerful, often capricious forces. That was the Inca reality. The Inca pantheon was vast and dynamic, populated by a multitude of gods and goddesses, spirits of nature, and revered ancestors known as huacas. These huacas could be anything from sacred stones, mountains, rivers, and springs, to mummified ancestors, temples, or even significant natural phenomena like lightning. The reverence for huacas underscored the Incas' deep spiritual connection to their environment, seeing divinity in the very landscape that sustained them. This meant that building a road wasn't just about engineering. It was often about navigating or incorporating sacred sites, a delicate balance between the practical and the divine. At the absolute pinnacle of the Inca pantheon stood Inti, the sun god, the most revered and central deity. Inti was considered the divine ancestor of the Sapa Inca, making the emperor his direct earthly representative and conferring upon him an undeniable divine right to rule. The sun was the source of life, warmth, and agricultural fertility, making its worship paramount for a society so dependent on farming. Temples dedicated to Inti, like the magnificent Coricancha in Cusco, were among the most opulent structures in the empire, often adorned with sheets of gold. Reflecting the sun's brilliance, a dazzling spectacle designed to inspire awe and reinforce the Sapa Incas' divine connection. Daily rituals and elaborate festivals were dedicated to Inti, particularly the Inti Raymi, Festival of the Sun, which celebrated the winter solstice and the renewal of the sun's power, a vital ceremony for ensuring the continued bounty of the harvest. Closely associated with Inti, though often considered an older, more abstract creator deity, was Viracocha. Viracocha was revered as the supreme creator god, responsible for bringing the universe, the sun, moon, stars, and indeed, humanity itself, into existence. He was often depicted as a bearded figure, a wise and powerful elder who emerged from Lake Titicaca, a sacred body of water often considered the birthplace of the sun and the first humans. While Inti received more direct public worship, Viracocha represented the ultimate, distant creative force, the architect of all existence. His worship underscored the Incas' philosophical understanding of the cosmos, a deep reverence for the ultimate source of all things. Beyond these two principal deities, the Inca worshipped a host of other important gods and goddesses. Mama Kila, the moon goddess, was Inti's sister and consort, revered as the goddess of marriage, festivals, and protector of women. Pachamama, the Earth Mother, was a ubiquitous and deeply important deity, worshipped as the goddess of fertility, harvests, and the earth itself. Farmers would offer her sacrifices before planting and harvesting, acknowledging her crucial role in their very survival. Illapa, the thunder and weather god, controlled rain, thunder, and lightning, vital for agriculture in the high Andes, and was often invoked during times of drought. The Inca believed in an interconnected cosmos, divided into three realms: Hananpacha, the upper world, home of the sun, moon, stars, and other celestial deities; Kaipacha, the middle world, where humans lived; and Ukupacha, the inner earth, home of fertility deities and ancestral spirits. Rituals, sacrifices, which included animals like llamas, and in rare, desperate circumstances, human sacrifices, particularly children, known as Qapacocha, offered to appease the gods in times of crisis. And pilgrimages to sacred huacas were integral to maintaining cosmic balance and ensuring the continued favor of the gods. Priests, known as Vilcas or Vilca Kamayoks, played a crucial role in mediating between the human and divine realms, interpreting omens, performing rituals, and administering sacred sites. The pervasive influence of religion meant that every significant undertaking, from building a new section of road to embarking on a military campaign, was accompanied by religious rites and divination. The Sapa Inca, as the son of the sun, led many of these ceremonies, further solidifying his sacred authority. Even the famous agricultural terracing, while a testament to engineering, was often aligned with astronomical observations, linking farming practices directly to the celestial rhythms guided by the gods. Historians still argue about the precise theological distinctions between the various Inca deities and the degrees of their interconnectedness. But what is clear is that their religion was a living, breathing part of their world, an omnipresent force guiding their actions and shaping their destiny. A truly holistic worldview where the spiritual and the practical were inextricably intertwined. Among the countless testaments to Inca ingenuity and spiritual devotion, one site stands alone, a silent, awe-inspiring enigma perched high in the clouds. And this section delves into the remarkable Inca architectural achievements with a specific focus on the enigmatic city of Machu Picchu, a marvel of engineering and aesthetics that continues to captivate and puzzle experts to this day. Imagine stumbling upon a forgotten city, perfectly preserved, nestled amidst mist-shrouded peaks, its stone walls whispering tales of a civilization that vanished almost into thin air. That's the experience of Machu Picchu. While the Inca built numerous impressive cities, fortresses, and religious complexes across their vast empire, Machu Picchu is perhaps their most iconic creation, largely due to its remarkable state of preservation and its breathtaking location. Discovered, or rather brought to international attention, by American explorer Hiram Bingham in 1911, the site was never found by the Spanish conquistadors, which explains its pristine condition. This fortunate oversight allowed it to remain hidden, almost perfectly preserved by time and nature, a true lost city of the Incas. The construction of Machu Picchu, likely undertaken during the reign of Pachacuti in the mid-15th century, showcases the pinnacle of Inca stonework, a technique known as ashlar masonry. This involves cutting individual stones with such precision that they fit together perfectly without the need for mortar, forming incredibly stable and earthquake-resistant structures. The massive, irregularly shaped stones are sometimes so tightly joined that not even a knife blade can be inserted between them, a testament to the incredible skill and patience of the Inca masons. How they managed to cut, transport, and perfectly place such enormous blocks, often weighing many tons, without iron tools or wheeled vehicles, remains one of the enduring mysteries of ancient engineering, prompting theories ranging from sophisticated leverage systems to, well, less plausible explanations involving extraterrestrials. Machu Picchu is not a single structure, but a complex urban center, meticulously integrated into its natural environment. It is divided into distinct sectors, including agricultural terraces that provided food, residential areas for its inhabitants, and a clearly defined urban core with palaces, temples, and plazas. The layout of the city reflects a profound understanding of astronomy and sacred geography. Many of its structures are precisely aligned with celestial events, such as solstices and equinoxes, and with prominent mountain peaks, which the Inca revered as ayllu, powerful mountain deities. This celestial alignment suggests a deep spiritual connection woven into the very design of the city. The purpose of Machu Picchu is still a subject of intense scholarly debate. While initially thought to be the last refuge of the Inca after the Spanish conquest, archaeological evidence now suggests it was likely built as a royal estate or a sacred religious site for the Inca Emperor Pachacuti and his lineage, a kind of opulent spiritual retreat. Its remote location, high above the Urubamba River, further supports this idea, suggesting it was a secluded, exclusive sanctuary rather than a bustling administrative center or a military stronghold. Perhaps it was a place where the Sapa Inca could commune with the gods, conduct important rituals, or simply enjoy a very exclusive vacation. Beyond Machu Picchu, Inca architecture throughout the empire demonstrated a consistent mastery of stone. Sites like Sacsayhuaman, a massive fortress complex overlooking Cusco, feature colossal zigzagging walls constructed with stones weighing hundreds of tons, showcasing the same incredible precision in fitting. Ollantaytambo, another significant site in the Sacred Valley, combines military, agricultural, and religious functions, again demonstrating advanced hydrological and engineering skills. The Inca favored trapezoidal doorways and windows, a design choice that added both aesthetic appeal and structural stability, particularly useful in an earthquake-prone region. The design principles of Inca architecture emphasized harmony with nature, often incorporating existing rock formations and contours into their constructions, blurring the lines between the natural and the man-made. They understood the flow of water and light, creating sophisticated drainage systems and designing structures that maximized natural illumination and warmth. The sheer scale and enduring quality of their buildings, many of which have withstood centuries of earthquakes and the passage of time, are a testament to their engineering genius and their profound connection to the land. Historians still argue whether the primary function of Machu Picchu was ceremonial, agricultural, or a royal retreat. But its enduring mystery only adds to its allure. It stands as a silent monument to a civilization that understood how to build not just for today, but for eternity, leaving behind a legacy of stone that continues to speak volumes about their incredible achievements. While the architectural marvels of the Inca, particularly Machu Picchu, often steal the spotlight, the empire's sustained prosperity and vast population were built upon an equally impressive, though perhaps less glamorous, foundation. Their groundbreaking agricultural techniques, and this section highlights the advanced agricultural innovations of the Inca, including their ingenious terracing and sophisticated irrigation systems, which collectively sustained their enormous population across diverse ecological zones. Imagine feeding millions of people in a mountainous region where arable land is scarce, often at altitudes where most crops would simply give up. That's the kind of challenge the Inca faced and brilliantly overcame. The Andean region, with its dramatic changes in altitude, varied microclimates, and often steep terrain, presents significant challenges for agriculture. Yet, the Inca transformed this challenging landscape into a highly productive agricultural powerhouse. Their most iconic innovation was the widespread use of terracing, often seen as enormous staircases carved into mountainsides, creating flat, arable land where none existed before. These terraces, known as andines, weren't just simple steps. They were meticulously engineered structures designed to maximize growing space, prevent soil erosion, and regulate temperature. Each terrace wall was typically built from carefully fitted stones, creating a stable platform. Beneath the surface, the Inca often constructed multiple layers: a base of large rocks for drainage, followed by a layer of gravel, then sand, and finally, a rich topsoil imported from the valley floors. This layered construction ensured excellent drainage, prevented waterlogging, and provided a stable growing medium, demonstrating a profound understanding of soil science and hydrology. The stone walls absorbed solar radiation during the day and slowly released it at night, creating a microclimate that extended the growing season and allowed for the cultivation of a wider variety of crops at higher altitudes than would otherwise be possible. It was like creating a series of individual, perfectly climate-controlled garden beds up a mountain. Alongside terracing, the Inca developed and extensively utilized sophisticated irrigation systems. They channeled water from mountain springs, glacial melt, and rivers through a complex network of canals, aqueducts, and reservoirs, often incorporating intricate stone sluice gates to control water flow. These systems brought water to otherwise arid regions, transforming barren landscapes into fertile fields. Some of these irrigation channels ran for many miles, navigating difficult terrain through tunnels and over ravines, showcasing a remarkable mastery of hydraulic engineering. The distribution of water was tightly controlled by the state, ensuring equitable access and efficient use of this precious resource, which, let's be honest, is a challenge even for modern societies. The Incas' agricultural success also stemmed from their deep understanding of crop diversity and ecological zones. They cultivated a remarkable variety of crops, expertly adapting them to different altitudes and climates. Potatoes, with thousands of varieties, were the staple crop of the highlands, able to withstand cold temperatures and harsh conditions. Maize, corn, was crucial in warmer valleys, used for food and the production of chicha, a fermented corn beer that was central to Inca rituals and social gatherings. Other vital crops included quinoa, beans, squash, peppers, and various root vegetables and fruits. This diversification ensured food security, as a failure in one crop or region would not necessarily lead to widespread famine. The agricultural calendar was closely tied to religious ceremonies and astronomical observations, underscoring the spiritual significance of farming. Priests performed rituals to ensure good harvests, and the Sapa Inca himself would often participate in the first planting of the season, symbolically connecting the divine with the bounty of the earth. The labor for these massive agricultural projects, from building and maintaining terraces to planting and harvesting, was largely provided by the mita system, a form of communal labor that mobilized vast numbers of people for state projects. Historians still argue whether the Incas' agricultural system was primarily a testament to their engineering prowess or their detailed understanding of agronomy, but it was undoubtedly a combination of both. Surpluses from these agricultural endeavors were carefully stored in state-owned kolkas, warehouses, located throughout the empire, often along the Qhapaq Ñan. These granaries acted as a crucial buffer against famine, allowing the Inca state to redistribute food to regions experiencing shortages, to feed the army, and to support workers on state projects. This centralized control over food production and distribution was a key factor in the stability and longevity of the empire, ensuring that the masses were fed, and thus less likely to rebel. The Incas' agricultural innovations represent one of the most remarkable achievements of their civilization, a testament to their ability to transform challenging environments into abundant resources, quite literally moving mountains to feed an empire. Beyond their monumental architecture and ingenious agricultural practices, the Inca expressed their worldview and societal values through a vibrant spectrum of creative endeavors. And this section explores the rich arts and craftsmanship of the Inca, from their intricate textiles and exquisite pottery to their sophisticated metallurgy and other forms of artistic expression, revealing a culture that prized beauty, utility, and symbolic meaning. Imagine a world where every object, from a simple pot to an emperor's tunic, told a story, infused with meaning and crafted with unparalleled skill. That was the essence of Inca artistry. Textiles stood at the absolute pinnacle of Inca art forms, considered even more valuable than gold or silver. This might seem strange to us, given our modern obsession with precious metals. But for the Inca, the creation of textiles was a sacred act, deeply intertwined with social status, religious ritual, and historical record. Fine textiles, known as cambi, were made from the incredibly soft and luxurious fibers of vicuña and alpaca, prized for their warmth and delicate texture. Weavers, predominantly women of noble birth or those trained in special state workshops called akalahuasi, houses of chosen women, produced cloth of astonishing quality, often featuring intricate geometric patterns, stylized animal motifs, and vibrant colors derived from natural dyes. These textiles were not merely clothing. They were a form of currency, a display of wealth and power, and even a medium for communication. Specific patterns and designs could indicate a person's social status, their ethnic origin, or even their military achievements. They were used as tribute payments, as gifts to seal alliances, and as offerings to the gods. Imagine wearing your entire life story, your lineage, and your achievements, all woven into your very clothes. That was the power of Inca textiles. Some researchers even propose that certain textile patterns served as a kind of proto-quipu, encoding narrative information, though historians still argue whether these patterns fully constituted a narrative system or were primarily symbolic. Inca pottery, while perhaps less famous than their textiles, was equally sophisticated and aesthetically pleasing. Their ceramics were characterized by distinctive geometric patterns, often in red, black, and cream, applied to highly polished surfaces. Forms varied widely, from functional vessels for storing food and liquids to elaborate ceremonial wares. The aribalo, a distinctive jar with a pointed base and flared neck, was a common shape, designed to be carried on one's back using a rope through its handles, a practical and elegant solution for transporting water or chicha. Inca potters utilized molds for mass production, ensuring uniformity, but also produced unique, finely crafted pieces for the elite, demonstrating a dual approach to craftsmanship: efficiency for the masses, artistry for the nobility. Metallurgy was another area where the Inca excelled, despite not developing iron or steel. They mastered the working of gold, silver, and copper, primarily for ornamental and ritualistic purposes. Gold, revered as the sweat of the sun, and silver as the tears of the moon, were meticulously fashioned into intricate jewelry, masks, figurines, and ceremonial objects, often hammered into thin sheets and decorated with repoussé designs. These precious metals were not used as currency, but were symbols of divine power and imperial wealth. The famous gold and silver statues found by the Spanish, often melted down for their intrinsic value, were not just artistic creations, but sacred representations of deities and ancestral figures, imbued with immense spiritual significance. Beyond these major art forms, Inca craftsmanship extended to woodworking, carving, and featherwork. Wooden keros, or ceremonial drinking cups, were often elaborately carved and painted, used in rituals and social gatherings. The Inca also created beautiful feather mosaics, using the vibrant plumage of tropical birds to adorn headdresses, tunics, and ceremonial shields, demonstrating their ability to acquire and utilize resources from diverse ecological zones across their empire. Even simple stone tools were crafted with an eye for both function and form, reflecting a pervasive aesthetic sensibility. The state played a central role in organizing and patronizing artistic production. Skilled artisans were often brought to Cusco or other imperial centers to work in specialized workshops, producing goods for the Sapa Inca, the nobility, and the state. This centralized control ensured a consistent imperial style. Yet regional variations and innovations were also present, reflecting the diverse cultural tapestry of the empire. The emphasis on high-quality craftsmanship, even for utilitarian objects, reflected a culture that valued order, precision, and beauty in all aspects of life. The Inca's arts and crafts weren't just decorative. They were essential components of their imperial identity, their religious practices, and their very way of life, speaking volumes about a people who left behind a legacy of beauty meticulously shaped by hand. The majestic edifice of the Inca Empire, built on a foundation of ingenious agriculture, sophisticated administration, and profound spiritual beliefs, reached its zenith under the long and prosperous reign of Huayna Cápac. But it was also during his time that the first ominous whispers of a world about to collide began to arrive. As this section covers his reign, the empire's undeniable peak, and the initial devastating encounters with the insidious spread of European diseases, unknowingly heralding an unforeseen apocalypse. Imagine the proudest, strongest person you know, standing tall and seemingly invincible, suddenly being struck down by an invisible enemy they don't even know exists. That was the tragic irony of Huayna Cápac's era. Huayna Cápac, meaning young powerful ruler or young rich one, ascended to the throne around 1493, inheriting an empire that was already vast and meticulously organized, largely due to the tireless efforts of his grandfather Pachacuti and his father Qhapaq Inca Yupanqui. His reign, lasting for over 3 decades, is often considered the golden age of the Inca Empire. He was a masterful strategist and administrator, continuing the policies of expansion and consolidation, pushing the empire's boundaries further north into what is now Ecuador and southern Colombia, incorporating new ethnic groups and their territories into the Tawantinsuyu. He even established a second major capital at Tumebamba, modern-day Cuenca, Ecuador, to better manage the northern provinces, a practical move that showcased his foresight and administrative acumen. Under Huayna Cápac, the Qhapaq Ñan, the vast road network, was further expanded and refined, enabling even more efficient communication and trade across the empire. Agricultural output remained robust, feeding a massive population, and the system of kolkas, state warehouses, was meticulously maintained, ensuring food security and allowing for the support of large public works projects and military campaigns. The arts and crafts flourished, with artisans producing masterpieces for the state and nobility, reflecting the empire's wealth and aesthetic sensibilities. It was a period of stability, prosperity, and cultural achievement, where the sun truly seemed to shine brightest on the Inca. However, beneath this glittering surface, unseen and utterly unknown to the Inca, forces were at play far across the ocean that would soon bring their world crashing down. While Huayna Capac was extending his empire northwards, the first Spanish explorers were making landfall in the Caribbean and Central America, bringing with them not just ambitions of conquest and conversion, but also an invisible, deadly cargo, pathogens against which the indigenous populations had no immunity. Diseases like smallpox, measles, influenza, and typhus, endemic in Europe for centuries, were devastating to populations with no prior exposure. The exact timeline of the diseases reaching the Inca Empire is a matter of historical debate, but it's generally accepted that smallpox, the most infamous killer, arrived sometime in the 1520s, well before Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors made their fateful appearance on the Peruvian coast. This was a silent, insidious invasion preceding the armed one. Traders, native peoples interacting with European outposts, and travelers along the extensive pre-existing trade routes likely carried the disease from Central America southwards, slowly but inexorably spreading through the dense indigenous populations. The impact of these diseases on the Inca Empire was catastrophic. Entire communities were decimated, often with mortality rates of 50% or even higher. It wasn't just the sheer number of deaths that was devastating. It was the selective nature of the plague. It often struck down the young, the old, and critically, the leaders, healers, and experienced administrators who were vital for the functioning of a complex society. Imagine a modern city losing half its population, including its entire governmental structure, its doctors, and its essential service providers, all within a few months. That's the scale of the societal collapse occurring. Tragically, Huayna Capac himself, at the height of his power, succumbed to this mysterious illness, likely smallpox, around 1527. His unexpected death, along with that of his designated heir, Ninankuyochi, who also died shortly thereafter from the same disease, plunged the empire into an unforeseen and brutal succession crisis. The greatest ruler of the Inca Empire, the man who had expanded its borders and presided over its golden age, was taken not by a rival army, but by an invisible enemy transmitted across oceans, an enemy that his people had no name for, no understanding of, and no defense against. This biological warfare, unintentional though it was on the part of the Europeans, pre-weakened the Inca Empire far more effectively than any army could have, setting the stage for the dramatic, rapid downfall that was just around the corner. A truly cruel twist of fate for a magnificent civilization. The sudden and tragic death of Huayna Capac, followed swiftly by the demise of his chosen successor, created a gaping void at the heart of the most powerful empire in the Americas. And this section details the devastating succession crisis that erupted between his two most prominent sons, Huascar and Atahualpa. a brutal period of internal strife that severely weakened the empire, just as an even greater, unforeseen threat loomed on the horizon. Imagine a magnificent tree, having weathered countless storms, suddenly splitting down the middle, leaving it vulnerable to the slightest breeze. That was the tragic state of the Inca Empire. Huayna Cápac, in his final days, had faced a difficult decision regarding his heir. He had initially designated Ninan Kuyochi, but when Ninan Kuyochi also succumbed to the mysterious plague, the succession was thrown into chaos. Two of his most capable sons emerged as contenders. Huáscar, born and raised in Cusco, the traditional capital and spiritual heart of the empire, and Atahualpa, born and largely based in the northern capital of Tumebamba, modern-day Ecuador, where his father had spent considerable time campaigning and consolidating power. Huáscar, whose name means golden chain, was the legitimate heir according to Inca tradition, as his mother was the Coya, the principal queen, and he had been groomed in the ancient traditions of Cusco. He commanded the loyalty of the southern nobility, the traditional Inca heartland, and the established religious authorities. He represented continuity, the old ways, and the centralized power emanating from the sacred city. Atahualpa, whose name means fortunate warrior, was a highly respected military commander who had spent years fighting alongside his father in the northern campaigns. He commanded the loyalty of the powerful Northern Army, a battle-hardened and loyal force that had been instrumental in Huayna Cápac's northern conquests. While perhaps not the legitimate heir by traditional standards, his military prowess and popularity with the northern legions made him a formidable claimant. He represented a more pragmatic, military-oriented faction, potentially less bound by Cusco's ancient strictures. The initial dispute was ostensibly over legitimacy and territory, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war, a brutal internecine conflict that pitted brother against brother and region against region, tearing apart the very fabric of the Tawantinsuyu. Huáscar, attempting to assert his authority as the legitimate Sapa Inca, ordered Atahualpa to swear fealty and disband his northern army. Atahualpa, confident in his military strength and the loyalty of his commanders, refused. The ensuing conflict, lasting for several years, roughly from 1529 to 1532, was marked by fierce battles, shifting alliances, and immense suffering across the empire. Both sides committed atrocities, further deepening the divisions and resentment. Key generals, such as Quizquiz and Chalcachima for Atahualpa, and Atok and Hango for Huáscar, led their respective armies in a bloody struggle for supremacy, transforming the once unified empire into a vast battlefield. Cities were sacked, populations displaced, and the intricate network of administration and resource distribution began to unravel under the strain of continuous warfare. Atahualpa's generals, particularly Quizquiz and Chalcachima, proved to be militarily superior. They systematically defeated Huáscar's forces in a series of decisive engagements, culminating in the crushing defeat of Huáscar's army near Cusco. Huáscar himself was captured in early 1532. Just as the Spanish were making their initial forays into Inca territory, a cruel twist of fate that sealed his doom. Atahualpa, now the undisputed victor, ordered the execution of Huáscar's family and many of his loyalists, effectively wiping out the rival faction and ensuring his complete dominance. It was a brutal consolidation of power, born out of a desperate struggle. Historians still argue whether Atahualpa truly intended to rule from Cusco or establish a new power base in the north, but his victory was absolute. This devastating civil war had profound and immediate consequences. Firstly, it left the empire exhausted and deeply fractured, with immense casualties and widespread destruction. The social and economic fabric was severely strained, and the traditional leadership in Cusco had been largely purged or demoralized. Secondly, and perhaps most crucially, it diverted the attention and resources of the Inca military at the precise moment a new, far more dangerous enemy was appearing on their shores. The best and most experienced Inca generals and their veteran troops were in the north, recovering from the grueling war, completely unaware of the tiny band of bearded men making their way inland from the coast. When Francisco Pizarro and his small contingent of conquistadors arrived, they found an empire not at its peak, but bleeding, wounded, and ripe for the picking. A tragically opportune moment for the invaders that would irrevocably alter the course of history for the Inca people. Against the backdrop of a vast yet wounded empire still reeling from the devastating civil war, a minuscule but determined force of strangers landed on the Pacific coast, setting in motion the final irreversible act in the drama of the Inca. And this section describes Francisco Pizarro's arrival in the Andes and the initial cautious and ultimately deceptive interactions between the Spanish conquistadors and the Inca, laying the groundwork for an unparalleled conquest. Imagine a single, seemingly insignificant pebble dropping into a vast still pond, creating ripples that would soon become a tsunami, engulfing an entire civilization. Francisco Pizarro, a seasoned but largely unlettered conquistador with a long history in the New World, was no stranger to daring expeditions. He had heard tantalizing rumors of a wealthy empire high in the Andes, a land of gold and silver far surpassing anything yet found. After 2 unsuccessful attempts and securing a royal license from the Spanish crown, he set sail from Panama in 1531 with a remarkably small force, fewer than 200 men, a handful of cannons, some arquebuses, early firearms, and about 24 horses. To us, this sounds like a suicide mission against a vast empire. And indeed, it should have been. But Pizarro had a crucial, unwitting advantage. He was walking into a power vacuum created by disease and civil war. Their initial landing on the coast of what is now Ecuador and northern Peru was met with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension from the local populations. News of their arrival and the strange maladies that often followed them would have traveled along the Inca road network, albeit slowly and perhaps garbled by rumor. The Spanish, observing the highly organized nature of the settlements, the presence of sophisticated road systems, and the advanced agricultural techniques, quickly realized that the rumors of a powerful, wealthy kingdom were indeed true. This was no scattered collection of tribes. This was an empire. Pizarro's strategy, honed from his experiences in Central America, was one of cautious probing and strategic deception. He understood the power of psychological warfare. His men, clad in gleaming armor, riding horses, animals unknown to the Inca and initially seen as terrifying beasts, and possessing firearms that emitted thunder and lightning, would have appeared utterly alien and immensely powerful to the indigenous observers. These weren't just men. They were almost certainly perceived as divine beings, or perhaps malevolent spirits, by many who had never seen anything like them. As they slowly advanced inland, encountering various Inca outposts and local communities, Pizarro meticulously gathered intelligence. He learned about the recent civil war, the immense scale of the Inca Empire, and crucially, that the victor, Atahualpa, was currently encamped in the northern city of Cajamarca, celebrating his triumph over Huascar. This was the intelligence Pizarro had been seeking. A single supreme ruler in a known location, and an empire still recovering from internal conflict. He immediately understood the strategic implications of this information. Messages began to flow between Pizarro and Atahualpa. Pizarro, through his interpreters, including the invaluable Felipilo, a native who had learned some Spanish, presented himself as an emissary from a powerful foreign king, eager to establish peaceful relations and share knowledge. Atahualpa, for his part, initially viewed the Spanish with a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and overconfidence. He was the victorious Sapa Inca, the undisputed ruler of the greatest empire in the world, surrounded by tens of thousands of his triumphant soldiers. What threat could a mere handful of foreigners pose? Historians still argue whether Atahualpa fully grasped the nature of the Spanish threat, but his actions certainly suggest he underestimated them. Atahualpa, intrigued by these strange newcomers, and perhaps eager to demonstrate his own power and magnificence, agreed to meet Pizarro in Cajamarca. He saw them as a curiosity, perhaps a useful tool for future conquests, or simply a group of men he could easily deal with once he was ready. This overconfidence, tragically, would prove to be his undoing. The Spanish were not seeking peace or shared knowledge. They were seeking gold, dominion, and conversion by any means necessary. Their initial interactions were carefully orchestrated, theatrical performances designed to lull Atahualpa into a false sense of security, setting the stage for one of the most audacious and devastating acts of conquest in history. The stage was set for Cajamarca, a meeting that would irrevocably alter the course of two civilizations. The stage for the ultimate confrontation was set in the bustling Andean city of Cajamarca, and this section recounts the pivotal, treacherous events at Cajamarca, including Atahualpa's audacious, yet ultimately fatal capture, and the strategic deception employed by the Spanish, a maneuver that stunned an empire and effectively decapitated its leadership in one swift, brutal stroke. Imagine walking into what you believe is a diplomatic meeting, surrounded by thousands of your loyal subjects, only to find yourself ensnared in a trap so cunningly laid that your entire world collapses around you in a matter of moments. Atahualpa, having crushed his brother Huascar and consolidated his power, was at the height of his influence, celebrating his recent victories and surrounded by his vast, triumphant army, estimated to be between 30,000 and 80,000 strong. He had agreed to meet Pizarro in the main plaza of Cajamarca on November 16, 1532. Pizarro, keenly aware of his minuscule force, had meticulously planned his ambush. He chose the plaza for its enclosed nature, with high walls and narrow entrances, making it a perfect killing ground for cavalry and firearms, and a death trap for a large, unsuspecting crowd. Pizarro positioned his few cavalrymen and infantry, armed with swords, lances, arquebuses, and a couple of small cannons, within the buildings surrounding the plaza, hidden from view. The plan was simple: lure Atahualpa into the trap, spring it, and seize the emperor, thereby seizing control of the empire. This was an incredibly high-stakes gamble, a testament to Pizarro's audacity and desperate ambition, recognizing that a frontal assault on such a massive army was suicide. Atahualpa, demonstrating his regal power and confidence, entered the plaza in a magnificent litter adorned with gold and silver, carried by dozens of his nobles, followed by thousands of unarmed attendants. His elite guard, though present, were also unarmed, a sign of respect and perhaps a fatal miscalculation of the Spanish intentions. He expected a formal diplomatic meeting, a display of mutual respect. He was mistaken. As Atahualpa and his retinue filled the plaza, Pizarro's chaplain, Friar Vicente de Valverde, approached him, carrying a cross and a breviary, a prayer book. Through the interpreter, Felipillo, Valverde delivered the requerimiento, a legalistic document read to indigenous peoples by the Spanish, demanding their conversion to Christianity and submission to the Spanish king. The document, completely alien in concept and language, was utterly incomprehensible to Atahualpa, who likely found the entire exchange utterly absurd. When Valverde presented the breviary, expecting Atahualpa to understand its significance as the word of God, Atahualpa, having no concept of a book, reportedly held it to his ear, then threw it to the ground in disdain, declaring that the Spanish should worship the sun and the moon. This act, whether intentional disrespect or simple incomprehension, provided the pretext Pizarro needed. Valverde immediately cried out for an attack, claiming Atahualpa had blasphemed against God. Historians still argue whether Valverde deliberately provoked Atahualpa or genuinely misinterpreted his actions. But the outcome was tragic either way. This was Pizarro's signal. The Spanish soldiers, emerging from their hiding places, unleashed a terrifying volley of gunfire and cannon fire into the dense, unsuspecting crowd. The thunderous noise, the smoke, and the sheer terror of invisible attacks from within the buildings threw the unarmed Inca into a state of utter panic and chaos. Horses, previously unseen, charged into the fleeing masses, their hooves and barding adding to the carnage. Swords and lances cut down the bewildered nobles and attendants. Amidst the massacre, Pizarro himself, along with a small group of his most trusted men, fought their way directly to Atahualpa's litter. The Inca nobles, despite being unarmed, fiercely defended their emperor, sacrificing their lives to protect him, but to no avail. Pizarro personally seized Atahualpa, pulling him from his litter in the midst of the bloody chaos. The capture was remarkably swift, brutal, and strategically brilliant. The massacre at Cajamarca, though involving a relatively small number of Spanish soldiers, resulted in thousands of Inca deaths, largely due to the tactical surprise, the psychological terror of horses and firearms, and the disorganization of an unarmed crowd. The capture of Atahualpa, the reigning Sapa Inca, was a devastating blow to the empire. It removed the central authority figure, leaving the vast centralized system leaderless and disoriented. It was an act of audacious brilliance and ruthless treachery, an event that single-handedly shifted the balance of power and irrevocably marked the beginning of the end for the mighty Inca Empire. The Spanish had not conquered the empire yet, but they had captured its beating heart. With the Sapa Inca, Atahualpa, held captive, the Spanish now possessed the ultimate bargaining chip, setting in motion a desperate attempt to regain their sovereign, and this section examines the astonishing events surrounding Atahualpa's ransom, detailing the immense wealth offered by the Inca for his release. A treasure hoard that dwarfed even the wildest dreams of the conquistadors, and represented an unimaginable outpouring of the empire's accumulated riches. Imagine being held hostage, and your captors demand a ransom, so you offer them a room filled to the brim with gold and silver. That's exactly what happened, and it still sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. Following his capture at Cajamarca, Atahualpa, despite his dire circumstances, quickly grasped the Spaniards' insatiable hunger for precious metals. He observed their feverish excitement over every glint of gold and silver, their repeated questions about where such treasures could be found. With a strategic mind, he formulated an audacious offer, one he believed would secure his freedom, and perhaps rid his empire of these strange, dangerous intruders. He proposed a ransom of unprecedented scale. He would fill the room in which he was imprisoned with gold once, and an adjacent smaller room twice over with silver, up to a line he drew on the wall, as high as his extended hand could reach. This was not a small room. Historians estimate its dimensions to be roughly 22 feet long, 17 feet wide, and the line marked about 9 feet high. To give you a sense of scale, filling this space with solid gold would have required an astronomical quantity of the precious metal. Atahualpa assured Pizarro that his subjects would comply, believing his continued survival was paramount to the empire. Pizarro, initially skeptical of such an immense promise, nonetheless agreed. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. He had his prisoner, and the prospect of such wealth was too tempting to refuse. He established clear rules. The gold was to be brought in the form of artifacts rather than melted down, so that its quantity could be more easily assessed against the marked line on the wall. Atahualpa, now a captive king, sent out commands across his vast empire, utilizing the very chusky runners and the efficient road system he had once commanded, ordering the collection and transport of gold and silver artifacts from temples, royal palaces, and state warehouses to Cajamarca. For months, a slow, shimmering river of treasure began to flow towards Cajamarca. Teams of Inca porters, carrying immense burdens, traversed the Qhapaq Ñan, bringing in magnificent objects, golden llamas, intricately crafted ceremonial vessels, plates, discs, and ornaments from the Coricancha, Temple of the Sun, in Cusco and other sacred sites. Silver statues, delicate jewelry, and utilitarian objects made from the tears of the moon also arrived, slowly filling the designated rooms. The Spanish chroniclers, usually not ones for understatement, themselves expressed disbelief at the sheer volume and artistry of the objects being delivered. The collection process was not without its challenges. The civil war had disrupted some regions, and many local leaders, still reeling from the conflict or resenting Atahualpa's recent triumph over Huascar, were hesitant or slow to comply with his demands, despite the Sapa Inca's direct order. There were also practical difficulties in transporting such heavy and valuable goods over thousands of miles of rugged terrain. Yet the loyalty of many and the deep-seated respect for the Sapa Inca's authority ensured the treasure continued to arrive. As the rooms began to fill, the Spanish, in their impatience and greed, began melting down the exquisitely crafted artifacts into manageable ingots to facilitate division. This act was a tragedy for art and history, as countless priceless works of Inca craftsmanship, representing centuries of artistic tradition and spiritual devotion, were reduced to mere bullion. It was like taking all the masterpieces from the Louvre and melting them into gold bricks. The historical loss is truly immeasurable. By June 1533, the ransom was largely considered complete, though some argue it was never entirely filled to the agreed-upon mark, a subtle detail on which historians still argue. The official tally of the treasure was staggering: over 13,000 pounds of 22-carat gold and more than 26,000 pounds of silver. In today's value, this would be hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars. Each of Pizarro's foot soldiers, a mere handful of men, received a share that made them incredibly wealthy, transforming them overnight into some of the richest commoners in Europe. Pizarro and his captains received even more immense fortunes. This ransom remains one of the largest payments for a single individual in history, a truly mind-boggling sum. However, despite receiving this unprecedented treasure, Pizarro had no intention of releasing Atahualpa. The strategic value of holding the emperor and the fear that he would rally his forces against them far outweighed any perceived obligation. The collection of the ransom had merely confirmed the immense wealth of the Inca Empire and the extent of Atahualpa's power over his subjects, making him even more dangerous in Spanish eyes. The stage was now tragically set for the final act of Atahualpa's life, a brutal betrayal that would send shockwaves through the empire. The colossal ransom, paid in an outpouring of gold and silver that left the Spanish conquistadors awestruck, sealed Atahualpa's fate rather than securing his freedom. And this section details the controversial trial and swift execution of Atahualpa, a profoundly shocking event that shattered Inca leadership, plunged the empire into further disarray, and revealed the brutal pragmatism that underscored the Spanish conquest. Imagine the universe's biggest payout for a hostage, only for the hostage to be killed anyway. It was a betrayal of epic, tragic proportions. Even as the last of the golden artifacts were being melted down, the debate among the Spanish about Atahualpa's ultimate fate raged fiercely. Pizarro and his closest advisors, particularly his loyal lieutenant Hernando de Soto and the royal treasurer Riquelme, were divided. Some argued for keeping Atahualpa alive, recognizing his immense value as a puppet ruler who could maintain control over the vast Inca populace and ensure the continued flow of tribute. Others, notably Friar Vicente de Valverde and segments of the more radical faction, vehemently argued for his execution, fearing that he would inevitably organize a rebellion once released, or even while in captivity. The growing fear among the Spanish was paramount. They were a tiny force surrounded by a vast empire, whose ruler, though captive, still commanded immense loyalty and spiritual authority. Rumors, whether genuine or fabricated, began to circulate that Atahualpa was secretly orchestrating a massive uprising, rallying his loyal generals, Quisquis and Chalcuchima, who were still in command of large, battle-hardened forces in the north. This fear, coupled with impatience and a desire to consolidate their control without the unpredictable element of a living emperor, ultimately swayed the decision. Pizarro, under immense pressure and perhaps genuinely believing the rumors of an impending attack, or at least finding them a convenient pretext, agreed to put Atahualpa on trial. The charges leveled against him were a bizarre mix of European religious and legal concepts completely alien to Inca law and custom. Idolatry, for worshipping his own gods. Polygamy, for having multiple wives, a common practice among Inca royalty. Incest, for marrying his sister, also an Inca royal tradition. Usurping the throne by defeating Huascar in the Civil War, and perhaps, most damningly, in the eyes of the Spanish, plotting against the Spanish crown. This trial was a legal farce, a sham designed to provide a veneer of justification for a predetermined outcome. The trial itself was swift and summary, conducted by a hastily assembled tribunal of Spanish officers. Atahualpa, despite his intelligence and dignity, could not defend himself against charges he couldn't comprehend, delivered in a language he barely understood. The most damning evidence came from biased interpreters and disgruntled native auxiliaries, eager to curry favor with the new power, despite a valiant effort by Hernando de Soto, who argued that Atahualpa should be taken to Spain and tried by the Emperor Charles V. Pizarro succumbed to the pressure. On July 26, 1533, Atahualpa was condemned to death. The sentence was to be burned alive at the stake, a truly horrific fate that, in Inca belief, would prevent his soul from passing to the afterlife. In a desperate last-minute plea to avoid this particular torment, Atahualpa agreed to be baptized, taking the Christian name Francisco. This act spared him the fire, as strangulation by garrote was deemed a more merciful and Christian execution method. The execution took place in the main plaza of Cajamarca, the very place where he had been captured, under the watchful eyes of the Spanish soldiers and a horrified crowd of Inca subjects. Atahualpa met his end with composure and dignity, a testament to his regal bearing even in his final moments. His death sent shockwaves throughout the Inca Empire. To his people, the Sapa Inca was not just a ruler. He was a living god, the son of Inti. His brutal and ignominious death at the hands of these foreign invaders was an unimaginable sacrilege, a cosmic disruption that destabilized the very order of their universe. The immediate aftermath was one of immense confusion and grief. The vast Inca army, still encamped nearby under generals like Quizquiz and Chalcuchima, was leaderless and directionless. The central authority had been decapitated, and the intricate web of command and control, so dependent on the Sapa Inca, dissolved. While some Inca nobles initially sought to cooperate with the Spanish, hoping to restore order or perhaps use the invaders against their own rivals, the execution of Atahualpa revealed the true, ruthless nature of the Spanish agenda. It made it clear that no amount of gold, no display of power, and no level of submission would ultimately save them from the invaders' ultimate goal, total domination. The path to Cusco, the heart of the empire, was now tragically open for the Spanish, largely unhindered by a unified imperial response. With Atahualpa brutally executed and the Inca leadership in disarray, the path to the very heart of the empire lay open, beckoning the conquistadors to claim their ultimate prize. And this section follows the determined Spanish advance on Cusco and their eventual capture of the Inca capital, an event that symbolically and largely practically solidified their conquest of the vast Andean realm. Imagine a predator, having stunned its prey, now moving in for the kill, slowly but inexorably closing in on the vital organs. That was the grim march on Cusco. After Atahualpa's death, Pizarro knew he couldn't simply hold Cajamarca indefinitely. His ultimate objective was Cusco, the magnificent capital, the spiritual, political, and economic center of the Inca Empire, a city rumored to be even richer than the fabled ransom room. However, advancing on a hostile empire with such a small force was still an incredibly risky proposition. Even with the emperor gone, he needed a strategy that would exploit the existing internal divisions and maintain the illusion of legitimacy. To achieve this, Pizarro made a shrewd move. He appointed a puppet, Sapa Inca. His choice was Tupac Hualpa, another brother of Atahualpa and Huascar, who, he hoped, would command some loyalty from the remaining Inca factions and provide a veneer of native authority for the Spanish. This was a clever tactic, designed to pacify the populace and facilitate the Spanish advance, making it seem less like an invasion and more like a change of leadership, albeit a very violent one. Tupac Hualpa, however, would soon die, possibly from illness, or perhaps even poisoned by disgruntled Inca factions, leaving Pizarro to appoint yet another puppet, Manco Inca Yupanqui, a half-brother of Atahualpa and Huascar, who would later lead a significant rebellion against the Spanish. The Spanish march south from Cajamarca towards Cusco was not entirely unopposed, but it was far less challenging than it would have been had the empire been united and at full strength. Atahualpa's victorious generals, Quisquis and Chalcuchima, still commanded large armies in the north and mounted some resistance, attempting to block the Spanish advance. There were skirmishes and ambushes along the way, but the Spanish cavalry, superior weaponry, and tactical advantage, often aided by disgruntled local populations who had resented Inca rule and now saw the Spanish as potential liberators from their former overlords, proved decisive in these engagements. One of the most significant obstacles was Chalcuchima, who was eventually captured by Pizarro through a mixture of cunning and force. Pizarro, fearing Chalcuchima's influence and loyalty to the deceased Atahualpa, accused him of plotting against the Spanish, and perhaps more tellingly, of orchestrating the death of Tupac Hualpa. Chalcuchima was summarily burned alive in the town of Jauja, a brutal act designed to terrorize any remaining Inca resistance and demonstrate the futility of opposing the conquistadors. This act of public execution was a clear message to any who dared defy them. As the Spanish approached Cusco, they were met by large numbers of native allies, particularly from the Cañari and Chachapoya ethnic groups, who had long suffered under Inca domination and now eagerly joined forces with the Spanish, hoping to cast off the Inca yoke. This internal disunity, exacerbated by the recent civil war, played directly into Pizarro's hands. It provided the Spanish with essential logistical support, guides, and crucially, thousands of native warriors who swelled their ranks, giving the tiny Spanish contingent the appearance of a much larger invading force. Historians still argue about the precise motivations of these native allies, but their cooperation was undeniably vital to the Spanish success. On November 15th, 1533, just over a year after the capture of Atahualpa at Cajamarca, Francisco Pizarro and his forces, accompanied by their numerous native allies, triumphantly entered Cusco. The city, though not destroyed, was undoubtedly a shadow of its former glory, still scarred by the recent civil war and the shock of Atahualpa's death. The remaining Inca population watched in stunned silence, their reverence for the sacred capital now overshadowed by an unsettling sense of dread. The Spanish immediately set about plundering the city, meticulously stripping the Coricancha, Temple of the Sun, and other sacred sites of their gold and silver adornments, repeating the tragic process seen at Cajamarca. Palaces were looted, and the wealth accumulated over centuries was systematically melted down into ingots, destined for the coffers of Spain. The ceremonial heart of the Inca world was ransacked, its sacred objects desecrated. The capture of Cusco was not just a military victory, it was a profound psychological blow, marking the symbolic end of Inca sovereignty and the beginning of a new, brutal chapter under foreign rule. While pockets of resistance would persist for decades, the fall of Cusco meant the centralized power of the Inca Empire was irrevocably broken. Even with the sacred heart of Cusco now under Spanish control, the spirit of Inca resistance was far from extinguished, sparking a valiant effort to reclaim their lost sovereignty. And this section describes Manco Inca's rebellion, detailing the various determined attempts by the Inca to expel the Spanish invaders, a prolonged and brutal struggle that demonstrated remarkable resilience against overwhelming odds. Imagine a wounded beast, cornered but still possessing immense strength, lashing out at its tormentors with a fury born of desperation. After the fall of Cusco, Francisco Pizarro, still attempting to maintain a semblance of control and legitimacy, crowned Manco Inca Yupanqui as the new Sapa Inca. Manco, a half-brother to both Huasca and Atahualpa, was initially cooperative, perhaps hoping to use the Spanish to restore Inca order, or simply to survive in the chaotic new reality. He assisted the Spanish in their early consolidation, even fighting alongside them against remnants of Atahualpa's loyalist generals, Quisquis and Chalcuchima, who continued to resist the Spanish. This period saw the Spanish establish their new capital at Lima on the coast, signaling a shift in the center of power away from the Andean highlands. However, Manco Inca soon realized that he was merely a puppet, a figurehead with no real authority. He was subjected to humiliating treatment by the Spanish, particularly Pizarro's younger brothers, who were left in charge of Cusco. They demanded riches, seized his wives, and publicly insulted him, treating him with utter contempt. Manco, a proud and capable leader, grew increasingly resentful of this blatant disrespect and the systematic plundering of his people and their sacred sites. He witnessed the destruction of his culture, the desecration of his religion, and the enslavement of his people, all under the guise of Spanish rule. Driven by a burning desire to liberate his people and restore the Inca Empire, Manco Inca secretly began to plan a massive uprising. He feigned loyalty, carefully gathering resources and quietly mobilizing his forces, sending messages to loyal cuirassas, local chiefs, across the empire. In 1536, having escaped Spanish captivity under a clever ruse, he convinced Hernando Pizarro he would bring back a golden statue, leading Hernando to allow him to leave Cusco. Manco launched his full-scale rebellion. The primary objective was to recapture Cusco. Manco Inca assembled an enormous army, estimated to be between 100,000 and 200,000 warriors, surrounding the city in a massive siege. The Spanish garrison in Cusco, numbering only a few hundred men, including a handful of loyal native allies, found themselves trapped and vastly outnumbered. The siege of Cusco lasted for nearly 10 months, a brutal, desperate struggle. The Inca warriors, despite lacking Spanish firearms and horses, fought with immense courage and determination, utilizing their numerical superiority, knowledge of the terrain, and ingenious tactics, including slingshots that hurled red-hot stones, setting fire to the thatched roofs of the city. The fighting was fierce and bloody. The Spanish, under the command of Hernando Pizarro, endured starvation, thirst, and constant assaults. They relied on their armored cavalry to break up Inca formations and their arquebuses to inflict heavy casualties, but they were pushed to the brink of annihilation. At one point, the Inca nearly overwhelmed the Spanish at the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, which overlooked Cusco, in a climactic battle where Juan Pizarro, Francisco's brother, was killed. The Spanish were only saved by timely reinforcements and the sheer tenacity of their defense. Simultaneously, Manco also dispatched a large army led by his general Qhapaq Yupanqui to lay siege to Lima, the new Spanish coastal capital. This proved to be a critical strategic mistake, as it divided Manco's forces and stretched his logistical capabilities. The siege of Lima was ultimately repelled by Francisco Pizarro and his forces, aided by their native allies. Despite the initial overwhelming success in surrounding Cusco and inflicting heavy casualties, Manco's rebellion ultimately failed to dislodge the Spanish. Several factors contributed to this. The Spanish technological superiority, steel weapons, gunpowder, and cavalry, their fortified positions, and perhaps most importantly, the continued support they received from significant numbers of native allies who still harbored grudges against the Inca Empire. Furthermore, the Inca army, composed largely of agriculturalists, had to disperse during planting and harvesting seasons, making continuous, long-term sieges difficult to maintain. Historians still argue whether Manco Inca should have focused solely on Cusco or attempted a broader, more coordinated uprising. After nearly a year, realizing that he could not break the Spanish hold on Cusco and facing internal pressures, Manco Inca lifted the siege and retreated to Vilcabamba, a remote stronghold in the high jungle. While the rebellion had failed to expel the Spanish, it demonstrated the deep-seated resistance of the Inca people and forced the Spanish to acknowledge that their conquest was far from complete. Manco Inca's rebellion marked a transition from conventional warfare to a protracted guerrilla struggle, setting the stage for the last stand of the independent Inca Empire. Though Manco Inca's grand rebellion against the Spanish failed to retake the heart of the empire, it did not signal the end of Inca resistance. Instead, it ushered in a protracted struggle, and this section focuses on the Neo-Inca state in Vilcabamba, the final defiant stronghold of Inca resistance against Spanish rule, a remote and resilient kingdom that held out against the invaders for decades, embodying the enduring spirit of a shattered but unbowed people. Imagine a small flickering candle in a vast dark room, stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. That was Vilcabamba. Following the unsuccessful siege of Cusco and Lima, Manco Inca retreated with a loyal core of his people and warriors to a highly remote and rugged region known as Vilcabamba, nestled deep within the Antisuyu, the eastern forest region of the Andes, a formidable natural fortress of dense jungles, deep ravines, and towering mountains. This strategic withdrawal, while signaling the end of conventional warfare, marked the beginning of a new phase, a guerrilla war of attrition waged from an independent hidden kingdom. The Vilcabamba state, though geographically isolated, was not merely a refuge. It was a conscious effort to preserve and perpetuate the Inca way of life, to maintain a remnant of their sacred empire free from Spanish control. Manco Inca and his successors meticulously recreated the structures of the Inca state within this remote territory. They built new settlements, cultivated terraces, conducted religious ceremonies, and maintained a small but effective army, constantly harassing Spanish outposts and trade routes. This pocket of resistance was a living, breathing challenge to Spanish claims of total dominion. Life in Vilcabamba was undoubtedly harsh. The terrain was unforgiving, and the constant threat of Spanish incursions meant vigilance was paramount. However, it was also a place of cultural preservation. Here, the traditional rituals of Inti worship continued. The quipu keepers maintained their records, and the Inca nobility strove to uphold the ancient customs and laws that defined their civilization. It was a time capsule, a last bastion where the sun truly still shone on the Sapa Inca. Manco Inca himself continued to lead sporadic but effective raids against the Spanish, often employing guerrilla tactics that frustrated the conquistadors. He even attempted to forge alliances with other indigenous groups who also resented Spanish rule, though these efforts met with limited success. Tragically, in 1544, Manco Inca was assassinated by a group of disgruntled Spanish renegades, former allies of Diego de Almagro, Pizarro's erstwhile partner, whom he had offered refuge. His death was a severe blow to the neo-Inca state, but the flame of resistance was immediately picked up by his sons. 3 of Manco Inca's sons successively ruled the neo-Inca state from Vilcabamba: Sayri Tupac, Titu Cusi Yupanqui, and finally Tupac Amaru. Each faced immense pressure from the Spanish, who launched multiple expeditions to subdue or negotiate with the rebel kingdom. Sayri Tupac, after years of negotiation and persuasion by the Spanish, eventually agreed to leave Vilcabamba in 1557 in exchange for a Spanish pardon, lands, and riches in the lowlands, hoping to secure a better future for his people. However, he died mysteriously a few years later, leading many Inca to suspect Spanish treachery. His half-brother, Titu Cusi Yupanqui, then assumed leadership. Titu Cusi was a far more cunning and defiant ruler than Sayri Tupac. He masterfully played the Spanish against each other, negotiated treaties like the Treaty of Acobamba in 1566, which allowed missionaries into Vilcabamba, and granted some concessions in exchange for peace, and continued the guerrilla war. He even dictated a detailed account of the Spanish conquest and the Inca Civil War to a Spanish priest, providing one of the few surviving indigenous perspectives on these tumultuous events. A remarkable document that sheds light on their view of the invaders. He used the very Spanish system against them, a clever move for a man literally living in the jungle. The existence of Vilcabamba, this independent Inca kingdom, was a constant source of irritation and a symbolic challenge to Spanish authority. It represented an unfinished conquest, a lingering threat, and a potent symbol of hope for other oppressed indigenous groups. The Spanish understood that as long as Vilcabamba stood, the idea of a free Inca Empire persisted. This constant tension eventually led to a final decisive push by the Spanish to eradicate the last vestiges of Inca independence, a culmination of decades of simmering conflict. Historians still argue whether the long-term survival of Vilcabamba was due more to its impenetrable geography or the strategic brilliance of its Inca rulers. But it was undoubtedly a combination of both that allowed it to endure for so long. The defiant existence of the neo-Inca state in Vilcabamba, a persistent thorn in the side of Spanish colonial power, finally faced its ultimate challenge, leading to the dramatic and tragic conclusion of formal Inca sovereignty. And this section narrates the capture and the public execution of Tupac Amaru, marking the definitive, heartbreaking end of the independent Inca Empire and the symbolic closure of a heroic yet ultimately futile struggle for self-determination. Imagine a final, brilliant spark extinguished forever, leaving only the echoing silence of what once was. Following the death of Titu Cusi Yupanqui in 1571, likely from pneumonia, though some suspected Spanish poisoning, a common suspicion given the circumstances, his younger half-brother, Tupac Amaru, meaning royal serpent, ascended to the throne of the neo-Inca state. Tupac Amaru was less inclined to negotiation and compromise than his predecessor, adopting a more hardline stance against the Spanish. He represented the purest form of resistance, refusing to yield any ground to the invaders. The new Spanish viceroy of Peru, Francisco de Toledo, who arrived in 1569, was a stern and efficient administrator with a clear mandate from the Spanish crown to consolidate Spanish rule, stabilize the colony, and crucially, to eliminate the lingering threat and symbolic challenge posed by the independent Inca state in Vilcabamba. Toledo saw Vilcabamba not just as a military nuisance, but as a fundamental impediment to the full spiritual and political integration of the indigenous population into the Spanish colonial system. He famously declared that as long as the Inca kings lived in Vilcabamba, the Indians will not be pacified. In 1572, Viceroy Toledo launched a full-scale military expedition aimed at conquering Vilcabamba once and for all. He assembled a well-equipped force of Spanish soldiers and a significant number of native auxiliaries, sending them deep into the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Antisuyu, determined to root out the last bastion of Inca resistance. This was no casual skirmish. It was a deliberate, large-scale invasion of the hidden kingdom, a final solution to the Inca problem. The Spanish expedition faced immense difficulties in the treacherous jungle environment. The Inca defenders, utilizing their intimate knowledge of the terrain, employed guerrilla tactics, setting ambushes, blocking paths, and using the dense vegetation to their advantage. They fought fiercely, but they were ultimately outmatched by the superior weaponry, organization, and numerical advantage of the Spanish-led forces. The Spanish slowly but inexorably pushed deeper into Vilcabamba, capturing key settlements and eventually reaching the main royal compounds. As the Spanish closed in, Tupac Amaru and his remaining loyalists attempted a desperate escape. They fled further into the jungle, hoping to reach the lowlands and continue their resistance from even more remote areas. However, the Spanish, aided by local indigenous trackers who were either loyal to the Spanish or coerced, relentlessly pursued them. After a grueling chase through dense rainforest, Tupac Amaru and his family were finally captured near the border of the modern-day Peruvian Amazon basin. This capture, after decades of evasion, sent ripples of triumph through the Spanish camp. Tupac Amaru was brought back to Cusco, the very city his ancestors had built and ruled, now firmly under Spanish control. Viceroy Toledo decided to make an example of him, to send an undeniable message to any lingering hopes of Inca resurgence. Despite pleas for leniency from some Spanish officials and even some priests, Toledo insisted on a public trial and execution. On September 24th, 1572, Tupac Amaru, the last Sapa Inca, was led to the scaffold in the main plaza of Cusco, the same plaza where Atahualpa had been executed nearly 40 years earlier. He was paraded through the streets, accompanied by a vast crowd of indigenous people, many of whom were weeping and wailing in despair. Before his execution, he reportedly declared his innocence and renounced the Spanish god, maintaining his dignity to the last. He was publicly beheaded before an immense crowd. Spanish chroniclers reported that upon his execution, a collective groan erupted from the thousands of indigenous spectators, followed by a profound silence that swept through the city, as if the very mountains mourned. Historians still argue whether Toledo's decision to execute Tupac Amaru was a strategic necessity or an act of excessive cruelty, but its impact was undeniable. The execution of Tupac Amaru marked the definitive, formal end of the independent Inca Empire. The line of Sapa Incas, unbroken for centuries, had finally been extinguished, while indigenous resistance would continue in various forms for centuries to come. The centralized, unified leadership of the Inca had been irrevocably broken. The fall of Vilcabamba and the death of its last ruler symbolized the complete subjugation of the Inca people under Spanish colonial rule, closing a chapter on one of the most remarkable indigenous civilizations of the Americas. Though the visible edifice of the Inca Empire crumbled and its last independent ruler met a tragic end, the intricate tapestry of its civilization did not simply vanish, leaving behind instead a profound and enduring cultural and historical legacy. And this section explores that lasting impact, including their influence on modern Andean societies and the subtle yet persistent ways their traditions, language, and worldview continue to shape the lives of millions today. Imagine a mighty river, diverted from its original course, but whose waters still flow, nourishing the land and sustaining life in countless, often unseen ways. One of the most immediate and tangible aspects of the Inca legacy is the widespread survival of Quechua, the language of the Inca Empire. Despite centuries of Spanish imposition and the dominance of Castilian, Quechua remains one of the most widely spoken indigenous languages in the Americas. With millions of speakers across Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and parts of Colombia, Chile, and Argentina, it serves as a vital linguistic link to the pre-Columbian past, a living testament to the empire's unifying power, and a source of cultural pride for many Andean communities. While the dialects vary, the underlying structure and many core vocabulary elements connect modern speakers directly to the imperial tongue. It's a bit like Latin. If Latin was still a vibrant, widely spoken language in modern Europe, beyond language, many aspects of Inca agricultural innovation continue to be practiced and revered. The ingenious system of terracing, Andenes, for instance, is still used in many parts of the Andes, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a practical, sustainable method for cultivating crops on steep slopes and managing water resources. The cultivation of traditional Andean crops like potatoes, quinoa, and maize, developed and refined by the Inca, remain central to the diet and economy of highland communities, a direct continuation of ancient foodways. The vast genetic diversity of these crops, a result of centuries of indigenous cultivation, is now recognized as a global agricultural treasure. The communal spirit and reciprocal labor systems, though often transformed by colonial and modern influences, also persist in various forms. The concept of aini, reciprocity, and mutual aid within a community, and minka, communal labor for the common good, continue to underpin social relations and economic activities in many rural Andean villages. While not identical to their imperial predecessors, these practices reflect a deep-seated cultural value system rooted in Inca traditions, where community solidarity often takes precedence over individual gain. It's a quiet defiance, a way of holding on to old values in a new world. Religious beliefs, too, show a fascinating syncretism. While Catholicism became the dominant religion under Spanish rule, indigenous spiritual practices and reverence for deities like Pachamama, Earth Mother, and Apu, mountain spirits, were not eradicated. Instead, they often merged with Christian traditions, creating a unique blend of spiritual expression. Saints' days might coincide with ancient agricultural festivals, and Catholic churches are often built on sacred Inca sites, subtly incorporating the power of the old gods into the new faith. This blending reflects the resilience of indigenous spiritual identities, quietly maintained beneath the surface of imposed religion. Inca material culture, from their distinctive pottery styles to the designs woven into textiles, continues to inspire and influence modern Andean artistry. Traditional weaving techniques and patterns, passed down through generations, still produce textiles of stunning beauty and complexity, embodying a direct link to the imperial past. The very ruins of Inca cities and sites, like Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, and Ollantaytambo, are not just tourist attractions, but powerful symbols of indigenous achievement and a source of profound pride for the descendants of the Inca. The legacy also extends into the political and social consciousness of modern Peru and other Andean nations. The Inca Empire, despite its brief existence as a unified state, stands as a powerful symbol of pre-Columbian greatness, indigenous resilience, and a complex civilization that achieved remarkable feats without many of the technologies considered essential in the Old World. It serves as a source of national identity and a point of reference in ongoing debates about indigenous rights, historical justice, and cultural recognition. Historians still argue about the precise degree to which modern Andean culture is a direct continuation of Inca practices or a product of colonial transformation. But the undeniable echoes are everywhere. The story of the Inca is not just a tale of conquest and collapse. It is a story of enduring influence, a testament to the fact that even when an empire falls, its essence can continue to shape the world for centuries to come. While the general narrative of the Inca Empire's rise and fall is well established, new insights are continually unearthed, reminding us that history is not static, but a dynamic field of ongoing discovery. And this section discusses recent and ongoing archaeological discoveries that continue to shed new light on Inca civilization, challenging long-held assumptions and deepening our understanding of this extraordinary Andean society. Imagine a giant, incredibly complex jigsaw puzzle, where every few years someone finds a few more pieces, often in the most unexpected places, suddenly revealing a clearer picture of the whole. The high Andes, with its challenging terrain and often excellent preservation conditions, especially in dry or cold environments, continues to be a fertile ground for archaeological exploration. Modern techniques, including LiDAR, light detection and ranging surveys, drone mapping, and advanced ground-penetrating radar, are allowing archaeologists to uncover previously hidden sites and structures, sometimes literally beneath the jungle canopy or layers of earth that have accumulated over centuries. These technologies can reveal intricate road networks, hidden agricultural terraces, and even entire settlements that were completely invisible to the naked eye. It's like having X-ray vision for the past. One of the most exciting areas of recent discovery has been the re-evaluation of the vastness and complexity of the Qhapaq Ñan, the Inca road system. While its main arteries were known, detailed surveys are now revealing an even more intricate network of secondary roads, bridges, and tambos, way stations, highlighting the sheer scale of Inca logistical and engineering prowess. These discoveries underscore how deeply interconnected the empire truly was, and how efficiently resources and information could move across its sprawling territory, sometimes making us wonder if their ancient postal service might have been more reliable than some modern ones. Another significant area of ongoing research revolves around the enigmatic quipus. While many quipus were destroyed by the Spanish, the handful that survive are still being meticulously studied using advanced computer analysis and statistical methods. Researchers are developing new hypotheses about their structure and potential for encoding non-numerical information, rekindling the debate about whether quipus might represent a form of three-dimensional writing. Imagine if we could finally read these knotted chords and unlock narrative histories directly from the Inca themselves, a silent library waiting to be deciphered. It would be like finding a whole new set of Dead Sea Scrolls, but made of string. New discoveries at well-known sites like Machu Picchu and less explored areas are constantly refining our understanding of Inca urban planning, religious practices, and daily life. Excavations have revealed more about the agricultural systems supporting these cities, the ceremonial functions of specific structures, and the social stratification within Inca settlements. For instance, recent finds at burial sites continue to provide insights into Inca funerary practices, health, diet, and even evidence of surgical procedures, revealing a surprising level of medical knowledge. Beyond the grand imperial sites, archaeologists are also increasingly focusing on the smaller provincial Inca sites and the settlements of the pre-Inca cultures they conquered. This research helps to contextualize the Inca Empire, showing how they interacted with and often integrated existing local traditions and technologies. Understanding these regional variations and pre-Inca foundations provides a more nuanced picture of the empire's formation and its impact on diverse populations. Moving beyond a purely Cusco-centric view, historians still argue whether the discovery of new settlements or the reinterpretation of quipu offers the most significant new insights into Inca civilization. But both are undeniably transformative. Furthermore, the study of human remains and ancient DNA, aDNA, is offering unprecedented insights into Inca population movements, disease patterns, and genetic relationships, even shedding more light on the devastating impact of European diseases prior to full contact. This scientific approach complements traditional archaeological methods, providing a more holistic understanding of the biological and social realities of life in the Inca Empire. Every new artifact, every newly mapped terrace, and every deciphered knot adds another brushstroke to the evolving portrait of this ancient civilization, reminding us that there is always more to learn about the people who built an empire in the clouds. The Andes still hold countless secrets, quietly awaiting discovery, promising even more revelations about a world that was both awe-inspiringly grand and remarkably complex. The grand narrative of the Inca Empire, from its mythical origins to its dramatic collapse, offers far more than just a historical account. It presents a rich tapestry of triumphs, innovations, and ultimately profound loss, and this final section reflects on the broader historical lessons offered by the rise and fall of the Inca Empire. From their unique approaches to societal organization and environmental adaptation to the devastating, enduring impact of colonial encounter. Imagine peering through a window into the past, not just to observe, but to glean timeless wisdom from the magnificent rise and heartbreaking fall of a civilization. One of the most striking lessons from the Inca is the remarkable effectiveness of their unique societal organization without the conventional tools of empire as understood by the Old World. They built a vast centralized state, managed immense resources, and governed millions of diverse people without a written script, as we typically define it. Without money, and without wheeled vehicles or advanced metallurgy, iron steel, their reliance on the quipu for administration, the mita system for labor, and the ayllu for social cohesion, demonstrates an unparalleled ability to innovate and adapt to their specific environment and cultural values. It challenges our assumptions about what is necessary for a complex civilization to flourish, proving that ingenuity can come in many forms, often dictated by need and environment. It makes you wonder if we're perhaps a bit too reliant on our spreadsheets and smartphones sometimes. The Incas' profound connection to and mastery of their environment stands as another powerful lesson. Their agricultural innovations, particularly the extensive terracing and sophisticated irrigation systems, are enduring testaments to sustainable land management in challenging conditions. They transformed mountainsides into food factories, demonstrating an incredible understanding of ecology and engineering that allowed them to feed a large population in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. Their ability to manage diverse ecological zones, cultivating a vast array of crops, ensured food security and represents a model of resilient agricultural practices that modern societies could still learn from, especially in the face of climate change. However, the fall of the Inca Empire also offers stark lessons on the impact of colonial encounter and the fragility of even the most powerful civilizations when confronted with unforeseen external forces. The arrival of the Spanish, a mere handful of men, coincided with a devastating trifecta that proved insurmountable for the Inca. The introduction of Old World diseases, which decimated their population and leadership. The internal strife of a brutal civil war, which left the empire fractured and exhausted. And the technological superiority of the Spanish in terms of weaponry and military tactics. It was a perfect storm that overwhelmed a proud and mighty empire in a surprisingly short time. This serves as a chilling reminder of how vulnerable isolated societies can be to external shocks, particularly biological ones. The Spanish conquest also highlights the role of perception and misunderstanding in historical events. Atahualpa's initial underestimation of the Spanish, viewing them as a curiosity rather than a serious threat, proved fatal. Conversely, the Spanish often fundamentally misunderstood Inca societal structures, religious beliefs, and political motivations, leading to acts of desecration and brutality that further destabilized the conquered populace. The story of the Incas' collapse isn't just about military might. It's about a clash of vastly different worldviews, where one side held a devastating technological and immunological advantage. Finally, the enduring legacy of the Inca, despite the conquest, speaks to the resilience of culture and identity. The survival of Quechua, the persistence of traditional agricultural methods, the blending of spiritual beliefs, and the ongoing pride in their heritage among Andean peoples today demonstrate that even a conquered civilization can leave an indelible mark on the future. The stones of Machu Picchu and the echoes of Quechua words continue to tell a story of a people who built an empire of unparalleled sophistication in the challenging heights of the Andes, a testament to human ingenuity and enduring spirit. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is not just about who won or lost, but about what was built, what was lost, and what ultimately survived, sometimes in the quietest, most persistent ways. As the last echoes of the Sapa Inca's reign fade into the Andean mist, and the final gleam of gold disappears into the historical ether, we are left with the quietude that settles after a grand tale. The mountains, those silent, watchful giants, continue their vigil, holding the secrets of a sun-kissed empire now tucked away in the deep chambers of time. Let the cool, thin air of the highlands carry you away now, drifting over ancient terraces, past silent stone cities, and into the gentle currents of dreams. Feel the quiet hum of history, not as a thunderous roar, but as a calming whisper, a lullaby from a world long gone, yet never truly forgotten. Let the mystery of the quipu, the resilience of the ayllu, and the majesty of the Cordillera blanket your thoughts as you drift into a peaceful slumber. The sun may have set on the Tawantinsuyu, but its light, in a strange, comforting way, continues to glow, guiding you towards sweet dreams.